Wolfenstein the New Order is one of the best games and probably one of the most underrated games this generation. It came out during the first year of the PS4 and it delivered an unforgettable experience. I was a big fan of the prior 2009 Wolfenstein made by Raven Software, and the New Order planned on taking Wolfenstein in a new direction with a new developer. I really appreciated that the game focused on a single player where story would be important to the experience. While I found the very beginning of the game to be a bit rocky, once you crash your plane, the game is awesome until the very end. I really appreciated and loved the over-the-top violence that was on display. The shooting was satisfying along with the tight shooting controls. I really liked the addition of having the ability to lean and essentially use different areas for cover. This was really useful in shootouts and in the stealth sections, and leaning is not something you typically see on consoles, so it was appreciated here. The game had a lot of options with its combat, and that many areas would not restrict how you tackled them. You could be very stealthy with silenced weapons and knives, or you could be able to go in dual wielding both weapons and taking everyone out. This allowed for many sections to be enjoyed more than once, and the unlockable perks increased the replay value. On top of all of this, the story gave the player characters that they cared about, along with some interesting villains you really wanted to shoot. BJ Blazkowicz was a damaged man that you rooted for because he was trying to do the right thing and cared for his people. His relationship with Anya was one of the pure things in the game, and it really made you care for her as well. You felt like you were up against a wall the entire time playing the game, as you were a faction trying to take out the Nazis because they had won World War II. In between the first and second game was the Old Blood, which kind of acted as a small side game to the main series. It was a solid game that provided a great amount of content for $20. Wolfenstein went silent for a while, and I was hoping that the game sold well enough to be able to warrant another entry. I fell in love with the New Order, and I wanted to see how the story would continue from there. Wolfenstein 2 released later and provided the next chapter in the story. It picked up right where the first game left off, and we see BJ in a very weak but determined state. While I do have some issues with the sequel, I found it to be mostly on par with the first game. The beginning level is fantastic as you're stuck in a wheelchair shooting Nazis. I found the story to still be just as dark and engaging as the first game, with some humorous moments to break up the bleakness. Some of this was a bit silly, and I liked it. The gameplay added the ability to dual wield different combinations of guns, which was a great addition. The music was outstanding again, but my main annoyance with the game was how the levels featured a similar approach each time, and lacked any sort of levels that would slowly build upon the action. For example, in the New Order, it featured a level centered around a concentration camp. You would complete several mini objectives to eventually break out of there. There was a nice build up to the explosive sequence. The new Colossus doesn't really feature any levels like this, and it more aims to give off a samey feel with its structure. Another annoyance was how the new Colossus didn't have the tightest controls compared to the New Order. The shooting and aiming felt just a bit off on consoles. While both of these things were noticeable, I still loved my time with the game, but it didn't surpass the New Order. I very much appreciated how Machine Games would focus on story-based single-player games. And on the other hand, I did feel like the addition of a separate two-player co-op mode would have been a great distraction with a friend. The Old Blood introduced challenge levels that were separate from the campaign, and I think those would have been fun to complete with a friend. So with Machine Games essentially working on a new side title for Wolfenstein with a focus on co-op, I was interested. My hope was that it did retain what the prior games did great and provided a new solid experience. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Wolfenstein Youngblood. Let's start out with the good. Youngblood has great gameplay. The shooting feels awesome. When Wolfenstein 2 launched, I experienced issues with the aiming that made it feel off compared to the perfection in New Order. Youngblood doesn't have this problem, and it feels solid right away. The gunplay is still over the top and very satisfying. And with this, the action is a blast with a friend. This is meant to be played in co-op, and it's fun to defeat your enemies with a buddy. The big difference compared to the prior games is the inclusion of these more open levels. The developers of Prey and Dishonored co-developed this game, and you can feel their footprint here. These areas are very much fun to explore your first time you go there. Youngblood presents you with these hub-like areas where you will complete many side missions and find random missions to complete. The highlight really comes from the exploration and how there's a bunch of small rooms to find and explore. It kind of reminds me of the recent Deus Ex games in that there's a lot to find. And there's an element of verticality with the use of the double jump. I hope they include more of this design in Wolfenstein 3 in conjunction with more linear levels. Stealth is an option, but I don't feel like it's actively encouraged like it was in the New Order, and it's more so a similar flow to the new Colossus. Before I get into the many areas that I found to be flaws or that need improvement, I do want to stress again that the gameplay is great. It very much holds this game together. Now let's get into the story and the flaws.
Yeah. Driven off by the storms, I reckon. I don't know about this.
Can I take the shot?
Situation like this, you need to pay attention to your surroundings. Your mind will slip into that scope. Awareness will narrow to the head of a pin. You make sure while you're stalking that bighorn, you're still watching out for what's stalking you, baby.
The story focuses on BJ's twin girls looking for their dad. They are not as compelling compared to our previous heroes. Within the first cutscenes and mission, we get some funny moments, and there's a lot of angsty moments that really don't do anything to help us connect to or root for these new characters. BJ is mostly sidelined in this entry, and the focus is on the twins. The game does not do the best job at introducing these two characters either. I think they would have been decent side characters, but I think this co-op game and story would have been much better to have BJ as a playable character and only have one kid. This way it would have been more of a personal journey and we could see him in the teacher role. You could even stick with the two kids and have one in the field with BJ and the other on the comms providing them information. But overall, I think the story would have worked better to incorporate BJ more since he is the central character of the series. This way our main hero feels like he's at the center of the action and less like he's sidelined. The story does create some interesting questions with its narrative since they jump so far in the timeline, but there are other elements that feel like they're thrown in there without any substance, and it has me concerned for what they're going to do with the third game. The first cutscene is solid as we get a glimpse of seeing BJ as a teacher. The game has a very weak set of villains and there's some dumb moments in some of the cutscenes. It is sad to see the villains lacking in this entry as the previous villains were great and had a great presence to them. Wolfenstein has also had some silly moments, especially in 2, but none of these really made the characters feel like they were dumb. The armor and ammo system is something that slowly frustrated me throughout the game. So essentially you have enemies with different armor, and next to their health bar it will indicate if it has a thick bar or a thin bar for their armor type. You need to use a gun that has a thick bar or thin bar to take out the armor of the same type. Otherwise it will take substantially longer to take down the enemy's armor. From far away, you can't tell the difference between a thin bar and a thick bar, and since it's hard to make that distinction, I think they should have used a color system instead. But that further shows how dumb this armor system is. I like switching my weapons in Wolfenstein for different situations, but this feels tacked on to have something else the player needs to consider, but it doesn't really enhance the shooting. It hurts it. I would prefer that they patch this out and just have a normal armor system like in the prior games. The enemies now have health bars, and I do like and dislike the health bars. The health bars do help to let you know if you've killed an enemy, since Wolfenstein lacks hit markers. But the health bars and the armor system takes your eyes away from the over-the-top action and has you focusing on the bars rather than the bloody results of the action. There is a lack in mission structure and variety with most of the story missions. The first story mission might be the best mission in the game. It feels like traditional Wolfenstein. You have a narrative reason to be there. The level has room for run and gun and stealth options. There's different items to grab, and it's a solid level with a decent amount of cutscenes. The main story missions that follow have a lot of repetitive elements. The brother levels have a very similar structure, and there are too many instances of you opening up elevator doors. It hurts the pacing, and it happens way too often. These missions needed the same touch and care of the first mission. but I did like that you did earn a new gun in each of the brother levels. The side missions can feel like padding in that they will require you to go to one area, then go back to the metro station, sit through a load screen to go to another area. I do like these open areas quite a bit, but I feel like that should have been more dense in how they approach their quests instead of having you run around everywhere and just making it seem like they're trying to pad out the runtime. Overall, I was fine with the RPG elements added to the game. It was nice to work towards a new level up and buy new skills, but the system does feel very limited. There are many skills that you earn that you just had in the prior games. For example, you need to earn the ability to dual wield. This limitation is also seen in the weapon customization. At first, it feels like this system is quite extensive, but it really only boils down to you getting a few upgrades and then improving them at set levels. I feel like more could have been done here. One aspect that I loved about Wolfenstein 2 was the introduction of being able to dual wield different combinations of weapons. This led to a lot of customization in your style and for different situations. In Youngblood, it feels very limited compared to the prior game. Now you can only dual wield a few guns rather than having what you want, and I do think a patch could really fix this and make it better. Overall, Youngblood is a very fun but mixed experience. There's a lot of small elements that actively work to hinder the enjoyment of the game. The shooting is very enjoyable and what the game very much relies on. If the shooting was not this good, I would probably have lost motivation to beat this game. Since there are many areas that need improvement, I think many of these could be tweaked with patches or improved in Wolfenstein 3. I would like to see this type of game used as a separate mode in Wolfenstein 3. Have Machine Games make a solo-focused story conclusion, and have Arcane Studios work on a separate co-op mode. Youngblood is best played in co-op. The AI only adds to the frustration when playing in single player, and it's sad to see a single player focused series treat the single player portion as a bit of an afterthought. If you're interested in this entry, I would suggest you only play it in co-op and only get this game on a deep sale if you want to exclusively play it in single player. Youngblood is by far the worst entry in the new Wolfenstein game, but I still had a lot of fun with it. I hope the developers learn from this game to make Wolfenstein 3 outstanding. I wish them the best, and I'm cautiously optimistic for the next one.